researching this week, and I found a really interesting illustration that I had never realized before. One of the greatest gravity-defying events of all time was the Orth Prize, a $25,000 reward offered in 1920 by hotel operator Raymond Ortiz to the first person who could fly across the Atlantic Ocean between New York City and Paris. And let me tell you about the three competitors. You know one, but let me tell you about the other two, because I never realized this. René Fonck was a World War I French flying ace whose plane was as expansive as his personality. Fonck wanted to arrive at his homeland in style with three others in his crew. The interior of his plane was more like the living room of a chateau than the fuselage of an airplane. There were heavy chairs, mahogany tables, a sofa that could be converted into a bed. Fonck took everything, including the kitchen sink. There was actually a cooking area set up with a small kitchen. He brought cases of wine and champagne. He loaded up the gifts for his friends, and before takeoff, he had a local hotel deliver a hot dinner that included clam chowder, terrapin, roast duck, and turkey. To keep it all warm, he placed it inside a heavily insulated cabinet. Now, it's hard to know if Fonck was really trying to cross the Atlantic or just to enjoy his ride. His plane was designed to carry no more than 20,000 pounds, but fully loaded, it weighed in at a whopping 28,000 pounds. He actually had to retrofit an extra wheel on the tail section to support the load. Well, gravity defeated Fonck. Even with full power, the plane only made it to the end of the runway. It rolled over a small incline, toppled forward, and burst into flames. Though Fonck and his navigator made it out, two other crew members did not. The second competitor, millionaire Charles Levine. He financed another team that may have had the best chance to claim the Orth Prize. He had a great plane and a qualified crew, but they never functioned as a team, and they had a single goal of getting to Paris, and never had a single goal of getting to Paris. So Levine was all about drama. He wanted two pilots, and he wouldn't tell which pilot he was going to use until the very last moment. And so he was going to choose between them right on the runway as they were about to take off. So he eventually abandoned that idea of the surprise, but he did choose two pilots, Chamberlain and Bertrand. And these two disagreed on virtually everything, including the flight plan and the equipment. And just when it appeared that things couldn't get any more dysfunctional, Levine presented Chamberlain and Bertrand with contracts the night before takeoff that essentially said he would share no money from the publicity or from winning the trip. Bertrand filed a temporary injunction on the flight, and they were grounded. And now you know the rest of the story. Charles Lindbergh wanted to be the first person to fly from New York to Paris and claim the prize. He was personally involved in every single aspect of the flight. He was in the factory as the plane was built and made sure to keep it simple. The Spirit of St. Louis had only one engine, so as to conserve fuel. It had one seat for the pilot to save weight. Lindbergh famously trimmed the excess paper from his flight plans, from his direction maps, to save weight. There were no luxuries, not even a forward windshield. Unable to see straight ahead, he had to navigate by using a side window and a small periscope to see. He landed in Paris on May 21st, 1927, a full 33 and a half hours after he took off from New York. Thousands of cheering people waited for him, and the press dubbed him Lucky Lindy, in honor of his success. I found that very interesting. In those days, a flight from New York to Paris didn't happen by luck. It took careful planning and intentionality. That's what you hear when you hear the story of the Orth Prize. Generosity does not happen by luck. Generosity happens by design. As we mentioned last week, though 45% of U.S. citizens give no money to charitable organizations of any kind, we can be certain that many wish they had done so and hope to be generous in the future. The problem is sometimes we're like the competitors for the Orth Prize. Some of us are like Funk, so weighed down by the gravity of possessions that we're unable to experience the freedom of generosity. Some couples and families are like Levine and Company. They have competing financial goals and conflicting personalities, and they lack basic communication skills, especially when it's around the topic of money. They will never break free from the culture of more. If you want your life to be a generous one, you need to be like Lindbergh. Generosity happens by design. There are those generous enough to know that to make a real contribution with time or money, they need to think about what they want to accomplish. They need to plan a strategy, and then they need to master the courage to act. Just like Lucky Lindy did not count on good fortune, we have to have a clear plan to be generous. And so, what I found is that there's really several things involved in that. And the first one is to make a budget. I was talking to a patient this week who had some pretty serious health things going on. But as we talked a little bit more, she said, what's really bothering me is that we have such a high mortgage that we can't pay it. And so in order to meet our bills, we've been using our credit cards. And all of a sudden I looked at my credit cards and they're way all maxed out. And we don't know what to do. And they were in their late 70s. And she said, I don't know how we got in that situation. She didn't have a budget. Budgets remind us that our finances matter to God. If faith is truly central in our lives, we have to plan for a portion of our income to invest in the work of God's kingdom. If we don't plan that first, then we're just offering God leftovers. How many times have you felt like you were giving God a leftover? It's an awful feeling when that happens to you, because when you sit back and you think about what God gives to you, all the blessings, it's hard. Discipleship cannot begin until after the spending ends. And the Bible is very clear that we need to provide for ourselves. Our passage today says that. God wants us to have the things we need. And God says, God will provide what we have, everything we need if we just trust. That's hard to do. This week, Barnett and I participated in the poverty simulation exercise that St. Mary's Hospital put on up at in Mayfield here. And there were 80 people who participated in this exercise. And one of the things that we had to do, we each came in and there were name tags upside down. We had to pick a name tag, and whatever name tag we picked determined what family we were a part of. So I happened to pick a name tag, and I was a 36-year-old African-American woman who was married, was unemployed, had a 15-year-old daughter who's in school, and a mother-in-law who had just had a stroke. And then, based on our stories, we had to try to survive for the month. It told us what our expenses were. We were very blessed. We had 2 cars. Our mother-in-law had a car, and my husband had a car. And my husband was employed full-time, so we were blessed there. And then we had to go about our day and figure out what we were going to do to try to survive. Our family, like I said, was very blessed, and our story turned out pretty well, but there were other folks who were not as lucky. There were folks who ended up in jail. There were folks who ended up losing their children. There were folks that ended up losing their home. And all of these things weighed down on you. And what you learned as you were doing that was one of the things that we had to do. I was blessed, I got a full-time job. And I went to apply for the job. And when I did, they had actual applications that you had to fill out. And some of the people there were just putting their name on it and nothing else. But I took the time to fill out the application, and there was a time crunch too. You had to do it in like 2 minutes. So I was rushing to fill it out. And it came to experience, and I tried to put myself in her place and decide what she might have done. And so I decided that she had a little bit of secretarial experience, and that maybe she worked as a clerk somewhere. And so I wrote that down, and then we got interviewed, and I was the third interview, so I was waiting. And she said, "Oh, I see you have experience." I said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "I would be so happy to do any job." And she said, "Well, I do have a full-time receptionist job." And I said, "Oh, that I would be so grateful to get that job." And she said, "Well, I have other people to interview, I'll let you know." And I felt like, oh my gosh, I need this job so badly. And I went and sat down again, and I waited, and I had to wait a long time again. And she called me up, and she said, "I think that you're going to qualify for this job." So I got a job, and that saved my family, because we had enough money to make it through. But so many families don't. So many families live paycheck to paycheck. And it's such a scary thing. And yet God says, "I will provide for you, but you have to listen to me." How often do we pray and we ask God for stuff, and we don't take the time to stop and to listen? We have to listen for what God is telling us. Sometimes it seems like God never answers, but I wonder if it isn't that we don't give God the time to listen. Because we know the answer we want, God may have a different answer in mind. And so it's really simple. Trust God. Who's driving? Move over into the passenger seat and see what happens. That takes a lot of courage. A lot of courage when you're struggling to make ends meet. Live simply is the second piece of advice. If you want to live within your means, keep it simple. And Lindbergh did that when he flew his plane. He trimmed the excess paper from his maps. And I read one story that said he actually cut into one little piece that he needed, but it was too late, it was already gone. But to save the weight, he did that. You don't have to do much research to see what people think about their possessions. This woman that I was talking to this week made the comment to me, she said, "Why is it that some people can win the lottery and I don't?" She said, "I have the same, I'm a good person, I do the same, why can't I win the lottery? I don't need much, I only need, enough to get by." And I said, "Well, do you buy a ticket?" And she said, "Well, no." We have to keep it simple. And we have to trust in God. 2 weeks ago, I issued you a clean-out challenge, and a lot of you came through on that. I had a lot of people asking me never to do that again. Our rubbish was overflowing. But some people came up to me who had done a clean-out when they hadn't intended to. And this is what they told me. Freedom is found in cleaning out, not storing up. There's a piece of advice there. Freedom is found in cleaning up, not in storing up. Yesterday's answers are today's questions. People said, "What was I thinking when I bought an electronic ab exerciser?" I had to stop for a minute and think about that one. Or, "Why did I collect a whole box full of Happy Meals toys? And where did all this stuff come from? And why do I hold on to things that I don't need anymore or that are broken?" Gravity defiers see freedom as simplicity. It's freedom from the pressure of debt and freedom from the complexity of having more than we need. So many people, you can't go from here to Gloversville or here to Amsterdam without seeing storage places. Places where people rent to store their stuff. How much stuff do we need that we have to store our stuff? And if you're storing your stuff, when was the last time you looked at your stuff? Have you visited your stuff lately? Your stuff should have visitation rights. Paul's biggest worry for us was that we would settle for a life held down by gravity and by our culture. And Paul was worried that we would miss the abundant life that was promised in Jesus Christ. In our heart of hearts, we don't want an ordinary life. We want an extraordinary life. And generosity is the path to that life. We can defy gravity, and we can cross the great distance. So, I offered you a clean-out challenge. And last week I suggested you consider budgeting. And this week I'm giving you a giving challenge. Instead of giving God your leftovers, what about this week intentionally thinking about what you should be giving to God? You received a giving card in the mail. If you didn't, there are some back on the desk, I believe, on the table. And please consider as we next week collect our giving cards so that we can figure out the budget for next year. So we know what kind of ministry we can do at this church. And so next week we'll be collecting all of that. And we'll be dedicating our gifts to God. Not leftovers, but our first fruits. The fruits that God asks of us. And so I invite you to do that. Amen.